This is Andrew Hall. You're listening to Dead Hand Radio. My guest on this episode is UFO researcher, author Preston Dennett. Preston has been investigating UFOs and the paranormal since 1986, when he discovered that his friends, family, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he's interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He's a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, a ghost hunter, paranormal research, author of 26 books at least on the UFO and paranormal topics, and he's an award-winning science fiction writer. Welcome to Dead Hand Radio, Preston. Thanks for being here.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Last time we met for the podcast, we talked about one specific crash in Kingman, Arizona. You gave me some pretty good info about that. Have you continued to look into that case, or have you pretty much closed the book on that?
I don't think you can ever really close the book once you open an investigation, because once you become hooked on that a case, or any case really, you're always on the lookout for new information. I'm not actively investigating that by any means, but yeah, I'd definitely like to just watch and see if anything new information comes along.
Okay.
Because all these cases that continue to unfold.
Yeah, and so the subjects that we're going to talk about tonight, I want to hit on quite a few of the areas that you've covered in your books: crashes and landings, bases, abductions. I'm not sure if you know anything about military abductions related to the UFO phenomena, but maybe we'll get into that a little bit. We'll talk about the paranormal and your method of investigating. Does that sound like a pretty good agenda? Think we got enough time to get through all that?
Yeah, I think we can give it a good try.
Good deal. So you left me on our last conversation with a pretty good tidbit about my local area, Las Vegas, and we'll get into that real quick. But in the interim, how are things going in your part of the country? You're in California, right? Southern California?
Yeah, that's right.
How are things going there? Can you just give me a little bit of an update and tell me how you've been doing since we last talked?
Yeah, doing pretty good overall. It's been a crazy time these days. So I used to be working full-time, and now working only part-time, which actually is kind of nice. I get to sleep late, spend a little more time on doing research and things like that. So weather's a little crazy. I can't complain because of what Texas is going through right now, but yeah, it's been an interesting time. Overall, I'm doing well though. Yeah.
Have you has anything landed on your desk that has intrigued you that you're looking into right now? Any new books in the works, or any active investigations that you've been looking into that you'd like to mention?
I am concentrating a lot right now on getting some of my research out there. So yeah, been putting out a lot of books because I'm like, wow, I've got all these cases I'm sitting on. And this is something that's always bothered me about other researchers. I'm like, Bud Hopkins had interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people who've had these experiences, and he put out 5 books, I think it was. And so I'm like really concentrating on that's been one of my major missions, really. But yeah, I'm always working on new cases as well, interviewing people. And I just put out a book called Onboard UFO Encounters. And I'm learning a lot from some of the witnesses who are in that book who are still having experiences. So I'm in contact with them and following their cases. And I got another book coming out that's filled with people who have, had encounters.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. And so the onboard UFOs, is that about people who have been taken on board the craft?
Yeah, I was looking through some of the cases I haven't published before. I'm like, well, I've got a lot here. I'm sure that this is interesting information. So I decided to make that the sort of qualification to get into the book. Each person in this book, there's, let's see, I think there's 15 people. Each has been taken on board a craft.
Wow.
10 men, 5 women is how it just ended up being. All across the United States and the world. There's a guy from England, a guy from the Netherlands. The ET spoke to him in his language, by the way, in his native language, which I find kind of interesting. So yeah, a lot of people are having onboard experiences, a lot more, I think, than the public perhaps realizes or thinks. It's not, I mean, Bud or Jalen Hynek, I heard a quote from him. He's the father of modern ufology. He said that 1 in 40 people have had an onboard experience.
1 in 40?
1 in 40.
Wow.
And it was, that's what got me involved in really asking people actively. Because I thought, like, 1 in 40, no way. It's way too many. I would know someone who's been taken on board, because I'm sure I know 40 people.
Yeah.
And, I did. And, I've got a large family. So I started asking everyone in the family, all the friends, my coworkers, and a bunch of them had encounters. And a few, showed the markers of, missing time, that sort of thing, face-to-face encounters with gray type ETs. So I think it's a lot more common. And the Roper poll found out, I think it was in 1991, not too long after, that they did a survey, a nationwide survey. They're a survey organization, and put on these questions that would show the markers if you are a UFO abductee, such as a very close-up UFO sighting, or missing time, or little balls of light, orbs in your house, or unexplained healings, injuries, these sort of things. And they found that 1 in 50 people had the markers. 1 in 50 people showed the signs of being an abductee. So yeah, I think this is much more common than people realize.
So is an abduction, okay, I guess not every abduction would result in somebody being taken on board. So there is a difference between abductions and on-board experiences. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is a problem with the whole UFO field and the UFO phenomena, is the terminology we use. And just look at the term UFO, which doesn't tell you much really at all.
Right.
And when someone says UFO, it's pretty much synonymous with alien craft, extraterrestrial craft. And so abductee is it's a word that's fallen out of favor, or UFO abduction, because some people are essentially invited on board, or it's not a scary experience for them. And contactee wasn't much better of a word, because that's related to the 1950s, where there was a lot of people claiming contact with very friendly ETs. And some of these cases have fallen out of favor with some UFO researchers who feel they were hoaxes. So word experiencer is what a lot of people are using now. And they're trying to replace UFO with UAP, which isn't quite catching on, but, and I think the reason is because it's nebulous as well. So I like to use the term onboard UFO experience, rather than, because that way, it leaves it open to how the person's experience, how they experienced it. And in those 15 cases I researched, there's a bell curve of how people interpreted it. Honestly, one guy's pretty sure this was a demonic phenomena. He's describing essentially an abduction with grays, though. And another guy feels that his case was angelic. I mean, he had a very friendly encounter. This was, let's see, I believe it was 1965 in New Kensington, Pennsylvania. And he was just a 13-year-old kid with his two friends. And they all saw this UFO. There was a porthole and there was human-looking figures waving down at them. And next thing he knows, 3 hours have passed. All the kids are like, what? Oh my God, it's 10 now? It was 7 o'clock when they saw this thing. And and the other two kids didn't remember seeing the UFO. Not at all. They had no memory of it. And they thought he was crazy and he thought they were crazy, or he was losing his mind. And he told his mom what happened. And she's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I believe you saw something. And the next morning, he was pretty upset about it. His friends still didn't remember. And he told his mom how upset he was. And she says, don't worry, look. Showed him the newspaper. There was a rash of sightings over his town. A bunch of people saw that same object. And over the next few days, weeks, he started to recall what happened. He had had 3 hours of missing time, but just spontaneously recalled being invited on board. And it was very friendly. These were human-looking figures in jumpsuits. Very beautiful, he said. The guy was strong, muscular. He had blonde hair, blue eyes. And the lady had brown hair, brown eyes. And they led him over to a part of the ship and opened a porthole so he could look out at the stars. And he didn't remember a whole lot, but I remembered what he did remember was absolutely friendly. So he came away from that experience thinking this was a really wonderful experience.
That's a weird feature of the experience or phenomena. Sometimes you'll have multiple people that see different things, and I don't quite understand that. I think Grant Cameron was telling me about that you could have two people looking at the same object, but it looks different to each one of them for some reason, or one of them won't see it at all.
Yeah, I know two guys who had missing time and were while driving, and one of them thought that what they saw in front of him on the road was a log rolling down the road in front of them, and the other thought it was an animal running away. And they had missing time following that weird thing, whatever it was.
Do you have any possible theory as to why that is? Is it the human brain, or is it what they're projecting for the experiencers to see?
I suspect that it's them putting an image in front of whoever they want. And I say that because of having looked at so many cases where this has happened. It's like, what is going on here? What you'll often see is there'll be a group of people. I don't want to say often, but this certainly turns up. There'll be a group of people, and some are seeing the UFO, or just one person, and the others aren't. I've talked to people who were seeing a UFO and could not point it out to anyone else. They did not see it. And it was not because this is a small thing in the sky. And sometimes a couple of people will see it and others won't. And some people won't remember it. Or some people will suddenly have a very strong impulse to drive away, and or they'll shut a person down, just shut them off. They will go to sleep or just stand there catatonic. So they have a very strong control over what people are seeing and what they're remembering as well.
I can't remember if I asked you this last time or not. I think I did, but have you ever had an experience yourself?
Yeah, I've had a number of experiences. The one I usually tell people about is probably the closest one, where a ball of light came right up to my car. And that's how I usually ended. I mean, this was at night, July 1992, late, driving down a little road, and this ball of light just swoops down. It's in front of my windshield, going back and forth, and darts away. And that's how I usually end the story. But it's occurred to me more recently over the past couple of years, like I don't remember what happened next after that. I don't remember driving home. I should have turned around, told my brother, my sister-in-law, oh my God, you're not going to believe what I saw. But I don't remember. I don't remember what I did. And in fact, I forgot the whole darn sighting for a couple of months and didn't talk about it for some reason until one day I'm like thinking, what the heck? I saw this. Why haven't I told anyone? Why? And it was really interesting to experience because I've interviewed many people who've had this experience and try to describe to me, how they could see a UFO and nobody's talking about it. Like a group of people. There was one case I did where there was 3 people driving on the road and the UFO, they just goes right by them and they don't talk about it. They're all looking at it and it was obviously strange. And it was this weird sort of calming, hypnotizing factor that they can put on you. Like, this is not the droid you're looking for type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking with, I've talked to a few people who've had experiences, both abductions and sightings. Um, it seems like, and I haven't studied this anywhere near as much as you have, obviously, but it seems to me like the abduction part of the phenomena, while it is traumatic to the experiencer, it seems to be less benign or more benign than it was previously thought to have been.
Yeah.
In other words, it seems like they're bringing humans on board to study them and see what is going on, but it doesn't seem like they're doing it to intentionally traumatize or injure them. It's almost like these whatever these creatures are, they just have no empathy for humans. They're just all business, and they don't really care if they hurt us, but they're not intentionally trying to hurt. And I say us, I don't mean that I'm an experiencer. I'm just talking about humans, the human race in general.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, or is there more like um, cases that where people are actually injured or intentionally hurt?
Yeah. Well, I think you could march out a bunch of cases to prove that there's people, there are unpleasant aliens out there for sure, who do not seem to show a lot of compassion. And like you said, have a job to do. It's an emergency situation apparently for them. And they seem to have little regard for how a person is feeling. And people do come away with injuries, certainly. This does happen. And when I first got in this field, I'm like, well, this is not good news. Like, what is going on here? People are being kidnapped against their will off, lonely roads or out of their bedroom, out of hotel rooms, anywhere. And they're being physically examined and experimented on. This does not look good. And people had PTSD, nightmares. But as I looked into it, I'm like, okay, well, what is actually happening to them here? What happens to someone when they're taken on board a UFO? Seriously. And what we find most is they are being physically examined. And most people do not describe this as being painful. It can be very scary, and it often depends on the witness themselves. Because I've talked to people who were not scared and were given freedom of movement and have long conversations. So it's how you react that dictates to a certain extent how you're treated. And I'm not gaslighting or putting the blame on any person who has a negative experience, because one guy I talked to from England, I call him Gary, he's not happy with the grays, and I don't blame him. He woke up on board a UFO, there's a gray over him sticking a needle into his head, and it was extremely painful. And he told the gray to stop, and it didn't. And he let out, he says, "You're hurting me." It didn't care. treated him like he was a dog at the vet, is how he put it. So he's not particularly happy about it, but he has had some very interesting and somewhat benevolent experiences as well. And as I look deeper and deeper into this, I'm like, okay, we actually have, I've documented some 300 cases of people who've been healed. They are physically healed, no joke, of everything from colds to cancer. Some of these cases are very well documented with doctors' reports before and after. And I ended up writing a whole book on this because I met a lady who had had this experience, who had a tumor removed. So I'm like, well, this is interesting. So yeah, people have been cured of kidney stones, cancer, liver disease, diphtheria, tuberculosis, diabetes. I could go on. Very serious conditions, as well as minor ones. Back pain. Got like 10 cases of people healed of back pain. 20 people healed of various eye diseases. So there's a benevolent aspect right there that I find very interesting. And when someone actually has any conversation at all with ETs beyond, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you, the conversations fall into three main categories that are pretty darn good news as far as I'm concerned. Because they're not saying, oh, what we don't see is torture. We don't see sadism. We don't see the ETs trying to hurt people and enjoying it. Instead, they're given messages. Often it's warnings about our own aggressions, our warlike ways, our prejudices, and that sort of thing. Often it's about nuclear proliferation or pollution, environmental changes, earth changes. These are the sort of messages that people are getting, which shows a concern on their part for our behavior and our planet. And they take people to the engine room. This is not uncommon. In that book with 15 people in it, that happened to 5 of them, I think it was. And some of them are sat down and taught how to fly these craft, or actually allowed to fly them, and they do. And the ETs tell them, this is how we do it. This is, we get our energy from electromagnetism. You don't need fossil fuels. This is a very strong theme that's turned up from the beginning in these onboard UFO encounters. That's another, I think, handle on what's going on here on their agenda. They're trying to move us off of fossil fuels and stop us from polluting our water and our air, destroying our planet. And thirdly, and this is very strong, people come away from their experiences spiritually transformed, for the better. And in that, they have the ability to give psychic readings. I talked to a guy that happened to. Or Reiki, or hands-on healing. That's very common. I hear that quite a bit. Talked to several people who've experienced that. Actually went to them and experienced how they're able to do energy work. And you can feel it. People come away with a strong interest in astral travel or out-of-body experiences or past lives or really anything alternative or spiritually expansive that sort of connects us to who we are as and our abilities. These are not superhuman abilities. These are natural human talents that they're trying to wake us up to.
Yeah, that's interesting. It seems like if we are the occupants of the zoo and they're the zookeepers, it seems like there really is an interest for them to guide us into being more in harmony with the earth and the environment.
Yep. Maybe they just want to protect their experiment.
Right.
I don't know exactly what's going on. Obviously, but as you collect all these stories and you start to see definite commonalities in them.
Yeah.
And definitely those 3 things I mentioned, those 3 topics of sort of what happens when you're taken on board a UFO, I think really speaks towards their agenda. I don't think they're here to take over. They are hovering over our minds. I can say that, and taking our metal. unequivocally. I collected some 50 cases, no kidding, of them hovering over gold mines and silver mines and iron mines and titanium mines and uranium mines and diamond mines, and I can go on. They are, not only hovering over them, but landing, sending beams of light down. Humanoids have been seen. The mine itself has been affected in some cases. So that's another agenda. They're taking our metals, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, we use those in our electronic devices and we have different uses for it. Um, it seems logical that they would have certain uses for it as well. And they probably are scavengers. If they're traveling long distances, they can't carry everything they need with them. So they get here and they have to gather up the resources that they need to be able to sustain themselves while they're here. Kind of makes sense. I mean, if you look at it from that perspective. And this
Yeah.
is all speculation, right? I mean, unless you have had conversations with these beings. Have you had conversations with them yourself?
No,
Okay.
no, not. I've talked to people who have,
Yeah.
and I've certainly had sightings, and I have had weird dreams and some indication of. I mean, I feel like they are on some level. I do have contact, and I'll give you an example. One day I was transcribing this lady's interview. I'm like, gosh, this lady's had crazy experiences. I wonder if she's telling me the truth. I'm pretty sure she is. I know she is, but I'm like beginning to doubt it because she's describing alien babies and about the time she jumped up and kicked an alien in the neck and it fell down apparently dead, and it stopped her abduction in mid-stride, and just other really incredible encounters. And I got her, I'm like, I wonder if she's for real. And I'm just paused and I'm thinking, and suddenly I got this very strong impulse to run into the roof of my condo. And it's not something you're supposed to do. You're not allowed up there. This was not where I live now. This was in Canoga Park, Southern California. And I'm like, all right. And I grabbed my glasses and I ran up there. I'm slightly nearsighted. I'd use them for driving. And got up there and I'm put on my glasses. I'm like, what the heck am I doing? When suddenly this light appears. I mean, it was literally within 10 or 20 seconds. I was not up there more than a minute by any means. It was pretty much right away. This light appears and it says, and it blasts me with this message. And it was very clear. It wasn't in words, but it was just this sort of message that said, you don't believe what, it's us. I'll call her Wendy. We're Wendy's ETs. Watch this if you don't think it's real. And this darn thing, which was just across the street, a huge orange ball of light just above the palm trees there, starts darting back and forth in this zigzag pattern. And I'm like, wow. So afterwards, I called her up. I'm like, oh my God, you're not going to believe your ETs came to say hello, I think. And she's like, yeah, this has happened to other people and so on. And I'm like, wow. So they must have been listening in. They must have been watching me, or how else, like,
Well,
wow.
what did they? I mean, was it like they read your mind, or were you talking out loud to yourself? Just
they must have read my mind because no, I don't talk. Well, I'm not.
Have any? The mass majority of people are not.
Yeah, I sure do because I've looked into it.
Uh-huh.
And people are like, well, it's blood type. It's blood type. I'm like, well, I never quite bought into the Rh negative thing because I've talked to people so many different races and ethnicities and ages. It's evenly divided between men and women. It can happen. Contact can happen at a very, very young age, all the way to elderly. And like I started looking specifically at like UFO healing cases. I'm like, well, these people are not only having contact, they're being healed. Why them? And what I found was people who are having extensive contact, at least 50%, have a history of it. It's in their family. It's happened to their parents, probably their grandparents. It looks like it goes back many generations. Their children are experiencing this. this is something that tracks families. These ETs have a very strong interest in genetics and human genetic lines and this sort of thing, hybrid babies, that whole deal. There seems to be a very strong interest in genetics. And I think that explains at least, half the cases of people who are having contact. But I know many people who've had a one-off, this is, no, I have no history of this. Well, it's not in my family. And there is a weird pattern I found in terms of the healing cases, at least, which is your profession, your job. It's what you're doing on Earth. And I first noticed it with John Hunter Gray. He's a social activist, an award-winning social activist. And I started to run into a bunch of cases of people who were social activists. And I interviewed Michael Carter. He was healed of a blood clot in his leg. And he got an award from President Clinton for his fight against racism and social justice and all this. I'm like, wow, this keeps turning up. And so I would make it a point, of course, to ask a person's profession anyway. And started to see that people who are doing good work for humanity in some capacity were the ones who are having contact or being healed. And that would include, doctors. There was a lot of doctors, teachers, environmentalists, human rights activists, inventors, musicians. They seem to really be interested in contacting musicians. A lot of cases of that. So that's a pattern. I think that explains why some people are being contacted, because they are the ones who are doing good work and are influencers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. If they're trying to somehow affect a social change within our individual societies around the world. So, have you talked with people from other countries, like say Russia or communist countries like China, um, and found similar results, or have you just not been able to get in contact with people in those areas?
Well, I have a couple of I have fans who write me. Trying to think, because I have gotten, I haven't done like formal investigations with people, but they do tell me some of their encounters. And it's very much like we see here, or pretty much this is a global, universal phenomena. And there does seem to be some cultural differences, but by and large, no, I'd say it's, for the most part, people describe the same sort of experience. I did mention one lady from Norway. She contacted me. She had no history of encounters. And she had Greys come into her bedroom and flip her around like a rag doll, scared the living daylights out of her. And she's, asking questions they're not answering. They flop her onto her stomach and put something against her back, and then quickly file out of her room through the wall. And she looks through the window and can see this weird blue light, and she rushes to the window and the light flicks off. And that's when she realized that her back was no longer hurting. She had injured her back pretty bad. And I'm like, wow, no history of encounters. Like, no, this is the only experience I've ever had. It came right out of the blue. And at the time of the experience, she was a graphic designer, but her true passion was animal rights. And that's what she was doing at the time I interviewed her. She's like, no, please don't use my name. I'm very active in my area in this, field of, in her country.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, no, don't worry, I won't use your name. But there was that pattern that turned up again. And then she saw typical Greys. And another guy from the Netherlands, he saw Greys. A guy in England, Greys as well. Most people describe Greys to me.
Quite a few presidents of our United States have also had, I wouldn't say contact, but they've had sightings.
Yeah, possibly contact.
Possibly, true.
I'm going to say Eisenhower, the Eisenhower meeting at Edwards Air Force
Yeah,
Base.
if you believe that myth, I mean, that's really a kind of a urban legend, really.
I'm not so sure it is, because I looked into it. I'm like, wow, there's immediately after it happened, there was a couple of whistleblowers who came out, and then some more witnesses came out. And the more you look into it, the more corroboration there seems to be that something happened. I'm not sure if, I'd like to know the truth about what happened in 1954 at Edwards.
Yeah.
But I suspect something happened. I really do. A lot of people are coming forth with information about this incident. And
it sure
not
is
unique.
a cool story. I mean, if it really happened, it's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, well, remember Gordon Cooper, he talked about how a UFO landed at Edwards Air Force Base. That was years later. And there were cases of UFOs landing at various Air Force bases. In New Mexico, I know that happened. So this is not entirely unique. There are cases where there has supposedly, or allegedly, I should say, been official contact with military officials. And yeah, Carter, he had a close-up sighting. He was with a large group of people. He wasn't president at the time, Jimmy Carter. Reagan apparently had a sighting, which his loose lips sort of got his sighting well known. I don't think he meant to do an interview, but he ended up talking to a reporter who reported on the sighting that Reagan had while governor of California. And according to some accounts, Reagan had an actual onboard experience. I think it was Lucille Ball. I think Brent Cameron writes about this. He's the UFO president guy.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. It could be a lot of them. We know that President Nixon allegedly showed alien bodies to Jackie Gleason, which comes from sort of a tattletale from Jackie Gleason's wife. So there seems to be a long line of information coming out from each president.
Well, it would make sense that they're communicating with the leaders of the free world. That just seems logical in my mind. And yeah, if they're choosing people for the reasons that you suggested, I think that makes a lot of sense too. And these are really big questions. And you've talked to all the witnesses that you've talked to, so you can form a hypothesis, a pretty viable hypothesis based on the body of work and the amount of investigations that you've done. And I tend to think that you're on the right track with it. Absolutely. But have you come to any kind of, well, not conclusions, but have you formed any hypothesis about where these beings are coming from?
Yeah, I have I'll call it my assessment.
Okay.
And I can't point to a planet, but perhaps names do come up. Andromeda, that's a galaxy. That wasn't a very satisfying answer to me. That's far away and it's not very specific. But Orion, that has come up in a few cases. Of course, the Betty and Barney Hill talk about Zeta Reticuli, and that does come up in other cases. But ultimately, the ET seem to be very coy, very reluctant to share that information in terms of specifics, and will give answers such as, because I've had people told me they've specifically asked, grays, ETs of all kinds, hybrids, mantids, they will communicate with you. And people have asked, where are you from? And they said, it's not important. Another person then asked, and they said, you wouldn't understand. Or we come from a place you don't know about yet. Or they, give coy, or just, we're from Mars, we're from Venus. like cone hands. We're from France.
Mm-hmm.
So I think,
Yeah, this
but
go ahead.
yeah, I think we are dealing with ETs, biological beings like us. I seriously do, with people in
From
biological
other,
bodies from other planets.
yeah.
I think that's what the evidence is showing us. And I really do. And I know that some people talk about, time travelers, or maybe they're interdimensional. Well, none of that precludes them from being biological beings like us. We ourselves are interdimensional. We have a soul, we have a dream body, an astral body. We'll go to the other side. There are other dimensions that I think that we've proven that through quantum physics and this sort of thing. And time travel, doesn't preclude them from being ET either. And people talk about, Jacques Vallée and Lauren Coleman and other researchers talk about how UFOs might not be extraterrestrial at all, and that this could be a trickster spirit type thing. And I think probably that is true in some cases, but by and large, no. Because if you look at the evidence in its totality, what we see is a phenomena that appears to be a metallic ship, right? And that's what it looks like in a photograph. This is what people are describing. There's portholes. It looks like a craft. And when it lands, it leaves traces, radiation readings, indentations, metal fragments in some cases. And it appears on radar. And people are taken on board. I mean, if the crash retrieval phenomenon is real, and I think it is, while it does rest pretty much solely on eyewitness testimony in terms of the evidence in the public arena, there's an overwhelming number of whistleblowers who have reported this. And if we actually do have the craft and the ET bodies, and it's not just Roswell, there's a lot of these reports, all bets are off. We know what we're dealing with. These are ETs, biological beings from other planets. They're just like us in most respects. They're more like us than different.
I tend to agree with you when I've heard the theory that they're from another dimension or ultra terrestrials, like they've been here on the earth for millennia, longer than humans have been here. Then they just stay out of sight from us. But that doesn't, like you said, that doesn't exclude them from being a biological entity.
Yeah, I do think they've been here for a long time.
Yeah.
But not in the numbers like now, not since the atomic age.
Right.
What we did, brought a lot of attention to us. And this is unprecedented, I think, in human history, at least in modern human history.
No doubt. I mean, the potential long range damage that nuclear weapons could have done during all that ground testing, there's no way to even measure it from our perspective. But it could have done damage, like, if it's multidimensional, what did it do to other dimensions?
Yeah, that's what the ETs have told people, that you are causing damage in areas you don't know about.
Right.
And that everything is connected. And
they do have I think we talked about this last time. They have a really sincere interest in our nuclear weapons. They've been seeing over nuclear power plants, military bases, nuclear missile silos. I think it was oh no, it was probably Jeremy McGowan who clued me in on the Nimitz incident was a nuclear powered aircraft carrier. That was considered a nuclear connection to that UFO sighting. You're familiar with that one, right?
Oh yeah, and I've run into this myself. One guy I interviewed, Ray Sachs, was an electrician's mate on the USS Clamagore. That's a submarine which carried nuclear warheads, nuclear torpedoes. And in 1971, he's heading up the East Coast at night. They're on the surface, he's a lookout, and a USO shows up. There's 4 people the captain, second in command, and another lookout and him. And this bright glowing object comes underwater and starts pacing their submarine. Came from astern, he said over 100 knots, super fast, totally silent. It was pretty large, and just paced their submarine for about 15 minutes. And I think it was sort of a message like, oh, we know you're carrying nuclear stuff. Because I interviewed another guy who was on the USS Long Beach, and same type of thing. That's a nuclear powered missile cruiser. And they had a major UFO sighting right off the far side of Catalina Island in Southern California. So there's for sure they're watching us very closely. There's one case that always comes to mind. I think this was reported to Mufon, or could have been New Fork, but one of those two, and it occurred the day before the Phoenix Lights. This was, the Phoenix Lights, yes. Huge UFO sighting. And this guy was, I believe, in Nevada, and stopped his car as he's driving along the highway because there's a UFO hovering overhead. Gets outside and is looking at it. Next thing he knows, he's inside the darn thing, and there's little beings, and they're showing him these charts and maps and screens and stuff. And they said, here, we have a map of all their nuclear resources and power and missiles on this planet. And we have the ability to turn all of this stuff off at every moment. We are monitoring everything very closely. They showed him all these little red dots. And they, again, cautioned him against nuclear proliferation. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to our leaders and doing the same thing, but they're not listening. So they're doing a grassroots movement and telling everybody.
That's everyone. Interesting. Yeah, that seems to, that seems to be the way. But again, this is why I asked you about the communist countries, because in communist countries, those grassroots efforts, they don't get very far because of the oppression that those people live under. This is why I was curious to me what kind of tactics are they using in those kind of countries. I just wonder. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, well, I do think there's a agenda on their part to announce their presence and get people to know that they're real and here, and which is moving towards open official contact. And the reason I say that is because I did a book on schoolyard UFO encounters, and another one just recently. It's my most recent book on drive-in movie encounters, where UFOs hover over drive-ins. And it's the same thing in this. What's going on here? It's very strange. Generally speaking, UFOs are evasive. You can't just walk out and see a UFO any given day.
Right. I still have never seen one.
Oh, man. Well, we should talk. There are things you can do to increase, your chances of having a sighting.
Okay.
But at any rate, they do have an agenda to show themselves off. They do a type of behavior known as a display. Many researchers have recognized this. And a good example is what they're doing over schoolyards. And the ultimate case of that is, of course, what happened at Ariel Elementary in Rua, Zimbabwe in 1994, September, I think it was, November, where a UFO landed next to the playground and ETs got out and gave telepathic messages, warnings, again, of environmental disaster and chopping down the forests and pollution.
This was like in the 40s? I mean, 70s? In the 70s?
No, this was 1994.
Oh, it's in the 90s? Wow. That was further back than that.
There's one that happened in Wales in the 1970s.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, I started looking into it. There was one in Florida a year after one in Australia. Westall High School had a UFO lander. They are landing next to schoolyards, hovering over them and showing themselves off to large groups of children. I've got 100 cases stretching back to 1950, and every year pretty much after that, they put on these little displays over schools, and it's exactly what they're doing to drive-in movies. I got 100 cases of that too, all across the US mostly, a little bit in Canada, but it's mostly a US phenomenon. But they will hover down right next to the screen and put on a show. No kidding. Because they want people to know that they're real. I think that's just judging on their behavior. I
Mm-hmm.
don't see how you can come to any other conclusion that they're saying hi at the very least and announcing their presence.
It seems that way. I mean, it certainly seems that way, and it just
Yeah, but I don't know if they're here to take over, though.
I,
I'm not
I, I
sure here
yeah,
to solve our problems either.
right.
You know what I mean? We have to solve our own problems. So I think it's our own warlike ways, our prejudices, our own problems to even run our own lives that's preventing open official contact. Because they can't just come down and take over and fix things. That would not help us. It would just be dependent on them.
Oh yeah, and if they were here just to teach us that and then they left, we would just go back to the ways that we've always had, and that is warring with each other and trying to destroy each other. Um,
Yeah.
well, let's change gears a little bit and talk, because those are the big questions. And I mean, unless you have more evidence that you want to talk about, I think we've really talked about that part of the conversation quite a bit. Um, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the bases. You wrote a book on underwater bases,
Yeah.
and are these bases all around the world, or are they just in certain locations? Certain specific locations.
Yeah. I focused my research on one area where I noticed there was an enormous number of cases in a sharply defined area, the San Pedro Santa Catalina Channel off the coast of Southern California. And so that's got me. I mean, certainly have heard of the idea of UFO bases because there are areas where there's a lot of activity. I point to like Mount Shasta, which there have been reports that there's something going on underneath there. And I know that there are many cases of people who report not being taken into what they will call a UFO, a little rounded room on a table. They're describing what looks like vast underground areas. And some report being taken to them, and they can see it through the portholes, and they go into an entrance, and it's an undersea base. That happened to a guy in Florida. What's his name? The Cardenas, Filiberto Cardenas. And he was abducted in full view of his wife and two friends. They took him right in full view. They had to go to the police, and they ended up finding him some couple of miles away from where he was abducted. And this is what he reported. He was later taken with his wife as well, both fully conscious. So there are, and I've talked to people who've had this sort of experience. I think there are multiple bases probably all over our planet and certainly under our oceans. And I've done a lot of research into this one area because starting in 1920s, I found cases in this one area stretching back really to the current day in large numbers. And if you go like up the coast a little bit, you get some USO, unidentified submersible object reports, but not in those kind of numbers. And you can go south too, and there are some, but this one area, the Santa Catalina Channel, where it gets real deep, in parts, it's generally 2,000, 3,000 feet deep, but parts are 5,000 feet deep. And there's deep channels there. I've talked to some Navy guys about this, and they're like, there's some very deep areas. Ironically, it's much deeper in Northern California where the Monterey Trench is. But there's something about this area. And then that was the first clue that pointed me towards the first data point to look into this. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of cases in a very sharply defined area over a long period of time. Why? What is it about this area?
I just had a comment from a friend of mine, Russell Pickering, who has done an interesting presentation on remote viewing. And are you familiar with remote viewing?
Yes.
He's a remote viewer also, and he's done a lot of research on that topic for years. I'm trying to get him into the chat so that he can talk to us. But would you mind if I brought him on and let him talk to you a little bit?
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I'd
Okay.
like to, because I do know one lady who astral projected and had an experience where she saw this undersea base in this area. Another guy I talked to who was abducted from Catalina Island, he wasn't taken into a UFO. He was taken to an underground area. And I know another case of a lady on the coast and another two ladies from the Channel Islands area who were taken into an underground area. So there's a cluster of cases in this one area where people are reporting being taken into an underground area, which is another data point.
Yeah, he's done a lot of research on those underground bases, and what the remote viewers, the original Stargate remote viewers, have seen uh, from doing those remote views. So if he can get in here and join us, I think he'll have an interesting perspective on that particular topic.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've heard of the Malibu anomaly, but
I think you mentioned that to me last time we talked, but feel free to talk about that again.
yeah, that was another thing that had me scratching my head about what's going on in this area. Because I'm like, okay, we've got also some reports involving not 10 or 20 objects, which is unusual enough, but few involving over 100. That's a lot of UFOs. Where are they coming from? They're coming from below. What's going on down there? Is there a base? What's going on? So I charted all these cases on a map. And I'm like, well, they're really clustered here off the coast of Malibu where it looks thickest. It's definitely somewhere in this channel. I think there might be a base down here.
Hmm.
And that's when information started to come out about this Malibu anomaly. Actually after that. So I was like kind of already speculating, but researchers had found this area where it looked really flat, and using Google applications, you can look a little closer and you see what looks like this artificial structure.
I have seen that. I've seen pictures of that, and yeah, that does
Yeah,
look unnatural. That looks very unnatural.
yeah. It depends who you talk to, believers and skeptics and debunkers.
Yeah.
It's called Sycamore Knoll. That's its official name. It's an earthquake fault, or there is one there. And some images don't show any tunnel, but some do. And it certainly does have a weird flat top to it. That looks kind of strange. And pillars or columns, it's definitely weird. And the reason I'm on the fence about it is because it's right where all these stuff is going on. I'm like, well, it's kind of right where I predicted something would be. And there it is. So all these data points start to really stack up. It's clearly not military, the activity that's going on in this area, because some of these witnesses are military themselves, and they're completely baffled by it. And these objects are not behaving in ways that military would behave, chasing cars down the road, or putting on displays, or waking people up in their homes, hovering over them, and this sort of thing.
Right. And there are a couple military bases along the coast of California. So
Yes.
where it seems like that would be kind of central between two major bases. What's the base in San Diego? Navy
Oh,
base in San Diego,
yeah, there's Camp Pendleton.
and
There's
there's an Air Force base.
Seal Beach is actually closer. Seal Beach Naval Weapons Station,
Hmm.
and the island beyond Catalina. Gosh, I can't believe his name is escaping me right now. It's not San Nicolas. It's a whatever it is. There's another island beyond Catalina, which is Navy owned. So yeah, it is surrounded by military, and this
Yeah.
LAX is right there as well,
Yeah.
which I'm sure the military knows about it. I mean, we've got some indications of that for sure. But I don't think it's them.
So it looks like Russell is in the chat, but his video is off. Can you hear us, Russell?
Yes, I can. And I'm trying to figure out, give me a second to figure out the video issue.
Okay, sure. I'm sorry about the chat room. I don't know why I can't figure out how to do that on the live stream. For some reason, it won't let me. Oh, here we go. Maybe.
There, I see you now.
Maybe that's it. You're muted, Russell.
Okay, there I am.
There we go. Hey, when would you try, if you can, try the chat right now? I think I just figured out how to turn it on.
Oh, I just logged out of YouTube.
Okay. All right. Oh, I did get a chat. The chat's working now. Great.
Okay, good. Yes, and thanks for the invitation. The only thing I was passing on to Andrew was...
Sorry, Russell. This is Preston.
Yes.
Preston Russell.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
No, I've been watching, listening. I couldn't agree with you more on the underground base situation. As Andrew mentioned, it's been a passion of mine for a few years. Now I haven't looked at it through the lens that you have. What I've done is gone back to pretty much 1972, 73, and the history of remote viewing and what they discovered about the bases. And just listening to you, especially that hotspot you're talking about, what do you think? Are they like, do you think they're like forward operating military bases? Do you think, I agree with you in terms
for
of
the ET?
Right.
Yeah.
And I agree with you in terms of abduction experiences possibly have taken places in these locations. There's some evidence of that found in remote viewing. So what is your conclusion about the function or purpose of the bases?
Yeah, I would like to know. I can only really speculate because I don't have a whole lot of firsthand information. I would be shocked if we don't have military undersea bases. There's definitely indication of that. I know there's one lady, Jean Marie Robinson, who wrote a book about her experiences. The book is called Alienated. And she described being approached by a government agent who said that they were aware of her encounters and that they did have undersea bases. And I know that there's one whistleblower account I found online and says that there is a base in this area where military and ETs are working together.
Yes.
So I think that's a possibility. One lady who had an astral travel experience went to the space and saw all kinds of equipment and grays, and they chased her out. And so she didn't get to see a whole lot, but she said that there was all kinds of scientific research going on. I think they're probably doing, the things that we know they're doing, which is in terms of, contacting people. I think that's one of their main agendas. And undersea base, underground base is a great place for them to sort of base their operations and still have easy, close access to a large population base.
Sure.
Because we see this in upstate New York as well. Reports of stuff coming in and out of the ground there. And they're right next to New York. And, Gulf Breeze, it wouldn't surprise me if there's a base down there somewhere.
When you mentioned Mount Shasta, I don't know, have you ever heard of a contemporary remote viewer named Lori Williams?
No, can't say I have.
Okay, she was blind tasked through a challenge actually on a radio show to do a remote viewing session on Mount Shasta, and her findings were mind-boggling as far as what remote viewing from her point of view says is going on there precisely corresponds. So when when you guys are done with your show, I'll send you a couple of things, including that Mount Shasta session, and see how it corresponds to your data. Because, like I say, my window on this is pretty narrow. It's remote. It's a compilation of remote viewing. Do you, in these contact scenarios, how much of it would you consider to be negative or malicious or maybe uncaring? I don't know. Where would you put it on that spot?
I think ETs behave very much like people do. I think their behavior falls under the same umbrella as human behavior. It's skewed slightly more towards the positive, in that when someone's taken on board, the worst I hear is that this lack of compassion, this uncaring, terrible bedside manner, and arrogance, perhaps, treating people like lab rats. That comes up often enough, where it makes me uncomfortable, certainly. But you'll talk to these same people and they don't feel like the ETs are evil. Some feel like these are doctors and they have a job to do and they're going to do it. And I think that's what we're dealing with in a lot of these cases, particularly the Greys. People are being, they're not meeting the tourists. They're not meeting, they're meeting police officers and doctors and people who have an emergency job to do, which is kind of how we behave as well.
Oh, sure.
If you're in an official position and you've got a job to do, it's no time for niceties. I don't know if I completely subscribe to the, kidnapping a person. There's really no way to rationalize that behavior. That's a crime. And if you're going to do that, you should really at least explain to the person what's going on. So that's my main problem with this whole onboard UFO experience. But ultimately, no, I'm very hopeful. I don't think they're here to hurt us at all. I think it would be much easier to prove humanity is hostile. When another human kidnaps someone else, it doesn't end well. Rarely does it end well.
Right.
And often when someone's kidnapped into a UFO, they're healed. Or seriously, they get amazing messages, or are spiritually transformed. Good things.
That's a pretty good argument for these beings being benevolent. But are there no cases that you've run across where people have been treated badly, like intentionally injured or even tortured? Like you say, you haven't seen anything like that, right?
One guy I interviewed woke up with a broken foot. He was not happy about that. And he would wake up with puncture wounds and bruises. They did heal him of cancer at one point.
That's so wild.
So it's a mixed bag in some cases.
Sure,
I do hear bad case. One case I didn't interview the person, but they were taken on board and apparently had a pain threshold type test. That doesn't sound pleasant at all. And other people have described sort of virtual reality scenarios where they are put into weird, unpleasant situations that ET seem to be studying their emotions. It's not all puppies and rainbows by any means. One guy, this was not my case, this comes from Constance Clear. She's passed away, but she's another researcher from the Midwest. She interviewed a guy named Andrew, that might be a pseudonym, but at any rate, he had a lifetime of pretty unpleasant encounters, which were recalled pretty much solely under hypnosis. And he'd go under hypnosis and it would be these horrific examinations and what he felt was like, experiments. And one time he recalled an experience where he was taken on board and they're like, "What's this in your kidney? What are these objects in your kidney?" He says, "Those are kidney stones." And they asked him, "Well, do you need those to survive?" And he says, "No, actually, they're hurting me. In fact, if you don't take them out, it's bad for me." And they said, "Oh, well, we'll take them out next time we take you." And they did. He actually drew the machine for the researcher, and she took it to a doctor, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's a lithosphere or lithography. It's the machine that we use to treat kidney stones."
That's wow.
And he had another experience with these grays. They were gray type ETs, and this gray female ET walks up to him and says, "Aren't we finished our experiments with you? Aren't you happy? Thank you for participating." He says, "No, I'm not happy. I'm mad as hell." And she introduced her name as Nelda. That's what she said her name was. And she says, "What's mad? What's hell?" And he had to explain it to her. And afterwards, she says, "Well, you know, we had to do this. You would have done the same thing if you were in our situations, and we do have problems understanding human emotions." So I think, you know, they're trying, and in some cases, no, they don't seem to quite understand human emotions. But in others, I can tell you, people have had very loving experiences and feel like these ETs are their friends, their family even. A good portion of the people I interviewed in that latest book felt that way.
You know, I don't want to be you know, I don't want to sound skeptic or be intentionally combative with you, but could that be some of this Stockholm syndrome?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That is something that happens when people have a prolonged experience with the kidnapper and have to do what they need to do to survive. And, you know, make friends with them, and they start to lose touch with that. I don't think that's what's going on here at all. I really don't. I try to take each case individually, because I will get in trouble if I start telling, because people have negative experiences and they're like, "Who are you to say that this is a benevolent phenomena when this happened to me?" You know, people have had physical damage as a result of their encounters. For sure, that does turn up. One guy, he had welder burns on his eyes, woke up as a little kid. That happened twice. And the only explanation could be that he was exposed to some weird light source. And he knew what it was. So yeah, it's not always easy to get a handle on this. But that's why I like to take each case individually. But to a certain extent, you can predict what a person is going to say if they've had this experience. And by and large, it's not something. I'm not afraid of UFOs personally. I think it's good news for humanity.
Isn't it also true that there are different races, and possibly these different races have different intentions? So
Yeah.
I personally have heard of mantids, grays, tall whites,
Human looking,
this, right, like the Nordic.
right?
I think those are the tall whites, Nordics. That's the Charles Hall experience from Area 51. He was a guard out at Area 51. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting story that he has. But and that seemed like they were working with the government in that particular scenario. It seemed like those ETs were working with our government, using these group of airmen as kind of like a way to acclimatize. The ETs were using these people as a way to acclimatize themselves to being around humans.
Right. Yeah.
So there's different beings. These different beings have different intentions. Have you done any research into what different types of beings there are?
Yeah. Well, I've certainly sort of surveyed my own research and compared it to what other researchers are putting forth. And yeah, I do get mostly grays, or some variation of grays. Some will describe short little android-like grays without any emotion. Others describe taller, like 4 to 5 foot, even up to 6 foot grays, which do have emotions. Mm-hmm. So I would say, gosh, 60, 70%, some variation of grays. Mm-hmm. A lot. After that would be praying mantis and human looking. And there's another category which is just a catch-all, really. It's strange humanoids, which could, I mean, one lady, she described a 9-foot tall humanoid. It looked partly human, but it clearly wasn't. Its eyes were too big. Its face was much too broad. It had a giant chin. It had orange straw-like hair. It was not a human, but was essentially humanoid. So I'm guessing there's an infinite number of types of beings out there. I know people throw around various numbers like 50 races or 5 or this sort of thing. But if you look at the literature and you look at what these people are describing, you will see that many of these cases are unique. These are beings that are not described quite the same, really. And it's very hard to match up any two cases and say, well, these are obviously the same exact beings.
Could that be similar to the topic we discussed, where people see different things, different people see different things?
Yeah, I suppose it could. I mean, we do know ETs do have the ability to put on screen memory. People do come away from their experiences thinking they saw a deer or an owl, or especially like little children, it could be a teddy bear, a superhero, a clown. People will come away with a wide variety of things and actually think they're seeing this. So I think they do have that ability, but by and large, I think so many people are describing your typical gray with the large dark eyes, almond eyes, wrap around the head, the tiny little nose, the line for a mouth, the almost non-existent ears. These details are so darn consistent. It's hard for me to walk away from the fact that that's probably what some of these guys do actually look like.
Yeah, no, see, I'm one that's had negative encounters since starting when I was 4. Some are conscious, a couple of adult ones are conscious, and then I did a particular, not hypnotic regression, but did some work in particular that also brought some memories forward. I have photos of physical markings. I'm in the process of trying to reconcile the people who have the more positive type experiences. I've come to grips with them. It's fine. Whatever they're doing. I'm with you on the volition aspect, especially the I guess damage you would say to my childhood. It was dramatic. When they first started appearing to me, it appeared as like black vortexes, almost like a tornado, and pirates. So as a child, I used to set up little protective barriers and things around my room. And then when worst case scenario happened, then I would just tune in and sing, the Mickey Mouse song to myself. And all of those encounters it was started in 1965. And I had no frame of reference whatsoever for these guys. The first one, I was wide awake when it came into my room, and full eye contact. And it was short gray. Came over, flipped the sheets back off of me. My mom was sleeping there. I tried to muster a voice. It took a few screams to get the voice out. Then she woke up and screamed, and phew, off went the little thing. And then starting maybe at 6 through 11 years old, it was just horrible, and it was frequent. So when I hear other people and people I trust, I don't have any doubt that that the majority, just like humans, the majority of them are good. Ultimately, I believe that way all have come from the same source in regards to consciousness and awareness. So it's interesting to hear, your representation of benevolence, compared to my experience. And it's a process I am in, trying to figure out what could it be. Maybe something like Andrew intimated. Could it be one species is doing hostile things, and yet another species is doing benevolent things, and yet another species is just, as you put kind of implied earlier, very matter of fact, about their interactions.
Yeah, I mean, we can't rule that out. There does seem to be different groups. We don't know what kind of government they have. I've talked to contactees or experiencers about this, and they say that basically there are large groups of these guys out there, and that they are very telepathic and they cooperate with each other, but they don't have governments like we think of it, because everything is very much known to everyone else. The incident happens. They are much more connected to each other than we are as a race. So that puzzles me because that offers little explanation of why some people would have negative encounters and others don't.
Well, two of mine, one, I came awake in the midst of it, and then the other is a recall. It involved both short grays, what one would call a tall gray, and human. Twice humans were involved. And that, I think for me, that was a little bit unsettling. The marks that I ended up having on my back that I have photos of, I was researching online and just started to find tens of people with those exact same marks in the exact same place. In fact, there was a case about 250 miles as the crow flies from where I am, in Vancouver, British Columbia, where the guy, a police got involved because the children also had some marks on their bodies. But the photo of the guy's back was identical, literally identical to mine. And what that was a grid of red dots, maybe nickel size to quarter size, in perfect rows, 4 across, right dead center between the shoulder blades. And now, if you Google abduction, red dots, that kind of thing, there's a lot of pictures out there. People trying to find out what that was.
Those are just allergy tests, man. They're testing you for allergies.
Trust me, I tested my mattress, and then when I started finding people with the exact same marks, I had to give it some credence or some objectivity.
Yeah, I've heard that sort of thing many times. People will come back with various marks, triangles on their arm, or evidence of implants as well. People will go to the doctor and they're like, "What's this under your tooth? What's this in your sinus? You've got a foreign object in your brain." Of course, people who've had that, or in your foot, your hand, your arm. I don't, I think you mentioned my labs and military abductions, Andrew, earlier.
Yeah.
And I do think that probably happens. There is a military aspect to some of this, and some people are being fooled into believing they're being abducted by ETs when it's not. It's government. I'm not sure that I don't think, let me put it more succinctly, I don't think that is what's happening with most people who are being taken on board a craft and see ETs. I think it's what it appears to be. And yeah, getting a handle on their agenda and why they pick certain people and what exactly they're doing. We're getting closer, but it's still a mystery. We don't know ultimately why they're showing such a very strong interest in humanity and all things human and all things Earth. I mean, they're collecting plants, they're collecting animals, they're collecting our genetic material, and they've been doing this for a very long time.
Russell, did we answer your questions about the bases when we were talking about the underwater base is that near Catalina?
Well, I do want to ask, what was the name of your book on the underwater base? Because I want to pick that up.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's Undersea UFO Base. Is the title.
Yeah, I'll get that because I might be able to get permission to share something with you. One of the original remote viewers, trained by Ingo Swann himself and considered Ingo's best student ever, shared a session with me recently of a undersea UFO, some pretty interesting sketches, and his what we call aesthetic impact, meaning how did this stuff make you feel? He didn't feel good about it, and he wanted out of it. So that might be an interesting session for you to see. I've got permission to share certain aspects of it, but I've never shared the whole thing. But definitely will pick up your book. I've not. I mean, I've heard a couple people mention underground bases here and there, but not with the level of how shall I put it, expertise that you mentioned it. And that's why I originally hit Andrew up, said, wow, get the questions going, because I wanted to ask you a couple questions. So
questions are open now, but Preston, you also might find it interesting to watch the presentation that Russell did, because he goes into depth on the underground bases that are all around the world that the original Stargate remote viewers did.
mm-hmm.
That's a real good presentation.
And one of them is portions of that undersea base that you might find interesting, because the person that did that session, Tom McNear, his remote viewing work is just unbelievable, incredible. His accuracy, the clay models he's built of complex power plants that he was asked to view, ancient pyramids. It's just incredible. And so you might be interested in the ship that he sketched. And in particular, I was interested in his kind of like, I don't want to look any closer at this, whatever it is. So if there's a way of maybe Andrew could put us in touch, I'll send you the Mount Shasta session, since you mentioned that. I'll definitely be picking up your book, and then I'll look at your other books and see if there's something. Because for me, like I said, I'm trying to work out the fact I've always had negative experiences, which appear to have stopped probably about 2010. That's when I decided no more to take charge of it, and I don't sense or have any recall that there's been further activity. It was kind of a thing where I just really intensely declared my wishes for free will, and it seems in that, at least from that point, to have stopped. So I didn't mean to jump in on your conversation, but it was so interesting.
No, appreciate your input, Russell.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get some kind of a background noise from your feed.
Oh, yes. I'll tell you, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump off.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up here pretty quick anyway.
Yeah, my heating system just kicked on. There's nothing.
Okay.
So Preston, thank you so much for answering the questions. I'll take a look at your materials, and then if Andrew gives us a way to contact, I'll try to shuffle you a little data too.
For sure, Russell. Thanks for jumping in.
Great. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, Andrew.
Take care. Thanks for letting him do that. That was cool, because for some reason, I couldn't get those. I couldn't get the chat going, and now I'm trying to talk and read the chat at the same time. But we're at about 90 minutes into this, and we didn't get through half of the questions that I have for you, as always, Preston, because you're a wealth of knowledge. I did want to talk to you about that Las Vegas crash that you mentioned last time we talked. Could you sum that up in about 5 minutes?
Yeah, the Las Vegas UFO crash. Gosh, I forget which date that was. I'd have to look it up. Believe it was mid-1960s, thereabouts. But it's a very interesting case, because very well verified, and not a lot of people know about it. This was started actually up in New York, when radar stations started tracking what first they thought was a meteor, but it was moving far too slowly, and it was changing its path and coming lower. And it was tracked by, I think, 5 or 6 different Air Force bases across the United States. And at one point actually landed outside of town in Utah. And a bunch of people saw this thing. It was very bright. And in fact, it was so bright, it made the streetlights go out. And because it looked like it was bright as daylight. And this thing actually ended up meandering all across most of the United States, really, until it hit north of Las Vegas area and ended up crashing to the ground, where thousands of people saw this bright flash of light. This was in the mainstream news. There was talk of possible nuclear explosion and a bunch of conflicting reports coming out of military bases about what this was. But a lot of people saw it. And there's only a few reports of what actually happened at the site itself. One guy was flying over it and saw this object on the ground and said it was blazing with light and lit up an area for miles around it with an incredible brilliance. It's a really astonishing case with a lot of firsthand eyewitness testimony connected to it.
And you don't have do you have a year, approximate year? 50s, 60s?
Yeah, I'd have to look that up. I could get that for you in just a second, but
yeah, I'll wait. Because it's curious. The nuclear testing took place in Nevada, and to the north of Las Vegas. I think it was about 60 miles, maybe 100 miles north of Las Vegas. But it's curious that that's where it crashed. If it had been spotted throughout the whole United States, and then it gets to Nevada and it crashes in somewhere north of Las Vegas. That just makes you wonder if there was something, if it had something to do with the nuclear testing at that point.
Yeah, I don't know here. Let me see. I've got the date around here somewhere. Let's see. Okay, here it is. Yeah, April 18th, 1962.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was tracked in Air Force bases in Kansas, another base in Montana, in New Mexico, Utah, Wyoming. Had radar confirmation, traveling on a winding path, coming lower and lower. And it was tracked also by Air Force bases in California, in Arizona, and Nevada. Luke Air Force Base, Nellis Air Force Base, both sent out jet interceptors to actually chase after this thing. So they knew at this point that it wasn't a meteor. And it was moving at about 4,500 miles per hour. That's far, far too slow for a meteor. And this thing actually landed near an area in Utah. And one of the witnesses was a sheriff in Nephi, Utah. He could hear this thing as it moved overhead. It was making a loud roaring sound and sending off sparks, and looked like it was disabled, is how he described it. And many people saw it and described it as a very, very bright object. Caused a power failure actually in Utah. So it's really an amazing case.
Do you know how far north of Las Vegas it did crash?
It's really outside of Mesquite, about, 70 miles south of Reno. And Frank Edwards, he was really the main researcher who looked into this. And he said that the glare was so intense that witnesses in the streets of Reno were lighted as though by a gigantic flashbulb, and that people reported this from across 5 different states.
I wonder if that's the same crash that I've heard about that took place near Ely, Nevada.
No, I think that's another one.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, it's funny. I've written a bunch of books about various states: California, Arizona, New York, Nevada, and others, and they all have UFO crashes.
Yeah.
Multiple. I'm like, wow. Definitely not just Roswell. There's hundreds of these things.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you're one of the first people that I've talked to. And again, I've only been doing this for a short period of time, relatively short period. But you're one of the first people, you are the first person I've talked to that told me anything about a crash near Las Vegas. Now, south of Reno is more accurate. 70 miles south of Reno is not really that close to Las Vegas because it's about an 8-hour drive from here to Reno.
I think it got termed Las Vegas UFO crash because so many witnesses saw the flash there.
It did fly over Las Vegas, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep.
there was witnesses in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas was a completely different town at that time. But it's still, it does sound like the thing was disabled before it got to Nevada. That's an interesting case. Is that in one of your books?
Yeah.
You detailed that in one of your books. Which book would that be?
I detailed that in UFOs over Nevada.
Okay.
And the accounts do appear in other books about UFO crashes. I think Kevin Randall wrote about it, as did Bob Wood. He wrote a book on UFO crashes. Yeah, it's a pretty well-known UFO incident among crash retrieval researchers.
We've got so much more that we could talk about, Preston. But again, I want to respect your time. We've been already on this a little over 90 minutes. It's Saturday night. I'm sure you got things that you want to do. But I appreciate you being here and spending time with me. But before I let you go, please give people your contact information. Russell, for one, wants to reach out to you. Let people know, Facebook, Twitter handle, your website address, and all that stuff.
Yeah. I am on Twitter, Preston E. Dennett. Also, my website is prestondennett.weebly.com. If you Google my name, it should take you there. I'm on Facebook as well. You can contact me any of those ways through my website or by email, prestonufo@gmail.com. I don't mind giving that out because I always love hearing from people if they've got a story to share, or a question, or a comment, or whatever. I think this is a very important subject. I think there's a potential to really change our lives profoundly and society, and I think it will and is. So yeah, I really appreciate you having me on the show, and love talking with you. We'll have
Thank
to
you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we will absolutely do it again, and probably a lot sooner than the last time we talked was, I think, November or December of last year. So it's been a few months since we last talked. Maybe it was even longer than that. I can't really remember.
I feel like it was a little longer, but yeah.
It does seem, but I've only been doing the podcast. Well, my 1-year anniversary is coming up, so it's only been months. It hasn't been years, but yeah, it does seem like it's longer than just a few months.
Well, months last a long time these days.
It's true. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, man, I mean, like I said, I got a ton more questions for you, so I'll get you back on here pretty quick. How's your availability?
Yeah, good. Yeah, now
Okay.
I'm working part-time. I've got a lot more time to do this kind of thing.
Great.
Yeah, just let me know.
Good. Well, I'm doing these live streams every Monday at 5 p.m., every Saturday at 7 p.m., and I'm going to try to keep up that schedule for the near future. And we'll see how that works out. So I'll probably be reaching out to you pretty quick in the next few weeks, or maybe a month or so.
Very cool. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before I let you go, Preston?
No, I think I'm good, other than thank you. It was awesome. And yeah, I look forward to doing it again.
Good deal, man. Great. Again, I appreciate you coming on, and I will talk to you soon, my friend.
All right.